My name is Rune Hjarnø, historian of religion, PhD from the Uppsala University, and I'm just going to make a little comment for a dude named Ben who was talking about Norse mythology as the worst religion ever. First, one of the big serious backdrops at the internet is that you can say quite a lot of incorrect stuff in a very short time, and it'll spread pretty quickly. There's basically been documented that incorrect stuff spreads on the internet faster than correct stuff. But I'm going to try to kind of address some of the problems, at least in what Ben was saying. He started by Norse mythology, Zeus and Odin and that stuff, something like that. Well, Zeus doesn't belong in Norse mythology, so that sort of amounts to, say, Christianity, Jesus, Buddha and Muhammad and that stuff. I gotta tell you, dude, it's not a particularly good start, and then you go on to criticize the idea of Valhalla, or Valhall, as a place where dead warriors are sent, and that would create a particularly abusive kind of people. Well, first, how abusive were Vikings? Well, they were fairly abusive, but so were the Franks, or the Anglo-Saxons. People were pretty abusive in the Iron Age. It's just a fact. They didn't stop being abusive when they became Christians. In fact, they continued being super abusive. I'm pretty sure that scholarship, read scholarship that states how Franks, for instance, didn't rape, pillage and burn less than Norsemen in the age. Not even monasteries and churches and such. They also burned and plundered that stuff. Franks, it just isn't recorded in the stories because Scandinavians had not been Christianized yet. But one thing happened to Scandinavians, and that was that they had developed marine technologies. So what you should imagine is that you have Northern Europe, a region packed with aggressive Iron Age bastards who are tearing each other's head off all the time, and then one batch of them suddenly has Apache helicopters. That's pretty much what you should imagine. Cool. So that's just to the idea that Norsemen were particularly aggressive. They weren't. They lived in an aggressive time that also continued being super aggressive when people became Christian. Then there's the whole idea of Valhall. Now, this idea is definitely attested in Viking Age material. The idea of warriors being greeted by Odin in the hall, also characteristic of Christian belief in the same age, by the way. It was quite typical of Crusader religiosity, the idea that you went into war in the Holy Land, and then when you died, you come to heaven. And Christian Christian beliefs have had all kinds of ideas that through the ages that normal, kind, decent Christians today wouldn't adhere to. The blood baptism was a characteristic Christian ritual in I think it was the 2nd or 3rd century. It was a foundational ritual where Christians would basically go into Roman execution, and as a sign of Christian devotion, being thrown to the lions as a sign of Christian devotion. They call that the blood baptism, basically a kind of jihadi suicide. And of course Christians today wouldn't adhere to something like that. But well, the Valhalla idea was certainly there. There was also all kinds of other ideas about death. In fact, when you look at the material, you like the archaeological material and so on, you find a lot of ideas of death that are very diverse and very different. Living inside a mound together with your ancestors, for instance, is one example, or going to other kinds of death, dead realms of the dead. So first, it's not unambiguous, like anything in this world, and it's difficult to refute a batch of incorrect statements that are just sent out in 45 seconds, another I think personally that one reason for the specific Valhalla idea might actually be what historians of religions call millenarism. Now, millenarism is the idea that it's a specific mode of religion that often emerges as reactions to, for instance, ruptured traditional culture. And Scandinavia in the Viking Age and the Middle Ages was a setting where the traditional knowledge systems was very much threatened by the advancing Christianity. And you see actually these millenarian ideas at move in Scandinavia. This is comparable to what you find among indigenous groups. You see stuff like the ghost dance among the Great Plains Native Americans in the late 19th century and other situations. So these are millenarian, this idea of dying in battle and getting to a paradisical otherworld. It has a bit of a taste of millenarism. You find exactly that idea sometimes in millenarism, but that's just one idea of how it could be. But it's also worth noting that this was certainly an age with a warrior-esque religion. You can compare it very much to a period reflected in the Bible. If you read books like the Book of Judges, the Book of Joshua, the Book of Samuel, that particular segment of the Old Testament, you find the God of the Bible, for instance, ordaining, first he ordains these kind of slaughters, almost genocide-like behavior. I don't know of any attested example of Odin going that far. But what you find in the Bible is that he ordains actually the killing of all the prisoners, and that is actually archaeologically attested behavior in Northern Europe. You actually have example of North Europeans being almost biblically barbaric in the somewhat earlier part of the Iron Age, where you find these bogs and lakes that are filled with human bodies. It's pretty clear that there was a battle, and then the conquered army was basically killed and sacrificed together with all their weapons, and that was sort of the deal. And it's very similar to what you see in the Bible. So yeah. In a period that was that was somewhat worse than the Viking Age, an earlier period, you actually find almost biblical levels of barbarity in Northern Europe. And this is, of course, resting on the times more than on the specific forms of religion. Religion is something that is generated in humans relating with their times. So yeah, I hope that clarified a little bit. See you around.